Can you hear me? Hello? How's that? Barely? Test, test, test. Better? Need our sound guy to get on his game here. Oh, hey, Michael. Shabbat Shalom. So today is Deuteronomy 16:18 to 21:9. But first, let's start and just welcome in Yahweh and Yeshua in this place, and then a word of prayer. Yahweh, thank you for this week. Thank you for our Torah and our foundation in spirit and truth. May all our words today be from you. May we glean something from the word that we haven't seen before and that we could take to others and be light to the world. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. So if you open your Bibles to Deuteronomy 16:18, we'll start. I'll do the first reading. It'll be 16:18 to 17:13. This is a very long portion, so we'll see if we get through all of it. But let's see. Okay. Deuteronomy 16:18. You shall appoint judges and officers in all your gates, which the Lord your God gives you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment. You shall not pervert justice, you shall not show partiality, nor take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. You should follow what is altogether just, that you may live and inherit the land which the Lord your God has given you. You shall not plant for yourself any tree as a wooden image near the altar, which you build for yourself to the Lord your God. You shall not set up a sacred pillar, which the Lord your God hates. You shall not sacrifice to the Lord your God a bull or sheep which has any blemish or defect, for that is an abomination to the Lord your God. If there is found among you within any of your gates which the Lord your God gives you, a man or a woman who has been wicked in the sight of the Lord your God in transgression of his covenant, who has gone and served other gods and worshipped them, either the sun or moon or any of the host of heaven, which I have not commanded, and it is told you, and you hear of it, then you shall inquire diligently. And if it is indeed true and certain that such an abomination has been committed in Israel, then you shall bring out to your gates that man or woman who has committed that wicked thing, and shall stone to death that man or woman with stones. Whoever is deserving of death shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. He shall not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. The hands of the witnesses shall be the first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hands of all the people. So you shall put away the evil from among you. If a matter arises which is too hard for you to judge, between degrees of guilt for bloodshed, between one judgment or another, or between one punishment or another, matters of controversy within your gates, then you shall arise and go up to the place which the Lord your God chooses. And you shall come to the priests, the Levites, and to the judge there in those days and inquire of them. They shall pronounce upon you the sentence of judgment. You shall do accordingly to the sentence which they pronounce upon you in that place which the Lord chooses. And you shall be careful to do according to all that they order you, according to the sentence of the law in which they instruct you, according to the judgment which they tell you. You shall do. You shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left from the sentence which they pronounce upon you. Now the man who acts presumptuously and will not heed the priest who stands to minister there before the Lord your God or the judge, that man shall die. So you shall put away the evil from Israel, and all the people shall hear and fear and no longer act presumptuously. Anyone see anything there? Any comments there? Let me see. Do we have someone pass the mic? Okay, Michael?
Yeah, so where you started out in Judges, or I should say Deuteronomy 16, verse 18, that is concerning the whole legal system. So if you look at Psalms 33:12, it says, "Blessed is the nation whose God is Yahweh." The people have, hold on. For the people he chose for his inheritance. So that nation that rules righteously and justly, if you notice, it says that you're to set up judges in all the corners of I'm going to just paraphrase here, of your nation, but also you're to set up judges. And then judges were not to take bribery, because that will alter and that will change their decision. And they're letting money buy their decision and not what is actually true righteous. And if you see that, what's happening in today, where you have large donors who are putting in very liberal judges, their decisions are being bought and paid for. So you don't have a nation that is ruling righteously and justly.
To go along with that, Mike, we have Proverbs 17:8. A bribe works like a charm in the view of him who gives it. Wherever it turns, it succeeds. He who conceals an offense promotes love, but he who harps on it can separate even close friends. So back up in verse 8, that works like a charm. This is kind of Donnie's area, but it's like a sparkling stone. So it entices, just that concept. And then opposite of that, God's love.
Yeah.
That's where we get kind of the idea of grace in the twinkling of his eye. You know, if he has a tear or we have tears, it enlarges our eyes, and it kind of is a sign of love.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah, in verses, well, I guess the whole chapter 17, it talks about those that, if you find anybody that is been guilty of wickedness, that you're supposed to inquire diligently. And it says, at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, he that is worthy of death shall be put to death. And so that this concept of 2 and 3 witnesses in the Torah is in the context of when there's a matter of wickedness to be judged, that it requires at least 2 or 3 witnesses, not just one. And also in verse 8, if there arise a matter too hard for thee in judgment, and this is often used to say that, this is just a thought, a proposal, that this is referring to the Sanhedrin, and it may be in part, but notice that it says that it's a matter too hard for thee in judgment, between blood and blood, between plea and plea, between stroke and stroke, matters of controversy, being matters of controversy within thy gates. And you should arise and go to the place which Yahweh shall choose, and you should come unto the priests, the Levites, and this is the one I never saw before, and unto the judge, and they shall decide. So this whole idea of matters of controversy is in the context of when there's a matter of wickedness, and there's a judgment that needs to be made, and at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, between blood and blood, and plea and plea, between stroke and stroke. So I don't know that these are matters of trying to interpret the laws in the Torah as much as it's more to do with when there's wickedness in the land and judgment needs to be made. Is it true? Is it not? So just a side note that for something to consider.
Nikki, right behind you.
And we talked about this morning that I really had never thought of it before, but when it keeps going back to it can't just be the one witness. And we know that Satan is the accuser, and he is the accuser. And so I really appreciated kind of this whole concept, spiritually and earthly, that it can't just be the devil that says, like, okay, you're put to death, because ultimately it's Yahweh who decides this. And so on a spiritual level, it's him who decides and who gets written in the book of life and all the things. And so even on an earthly level, we can't just take one witness. It does have to be multiple people to say. And then when we talked about, it's really like when Yeshua says, when they're kind of condemning the woman, and he says, okay, well then, then cast the first stone if you think that she deserves death. And so it's really like you have to check your heart when you really feel that somebody's doing something, because you do have to be the one to cast that first stone. And knowing that then, like, Yahweh is the ultimate judge, how is your heart? And so I really kind of appreciated that piece of this.
Yeah, especially with, like we were talking this morning too on the way here, it just, all the talk about judges, and it just points to Yeshua. He is the righteous judge, like it talks about in 2 Timothy and Revelation. That's why when it talks about the gates, like, how are you protecting the gates of your own life, of your house? What are you listening to? What are you talking about? Who are you associating with? Are you living a life of righteousness, or are you living a life of mixture? Which we'll see later, they'll talk about mixture, but it just really points to, and it makes me, I do appreciate the Torah, but it makes me even appreciate the Torah even more, having that as a foundation and being set apart to live that way, rather than just listening to, random YouTube people who say that this stuff doesn't matter.
And also, for both of these, we're also going to see that same concept again in 1915, if we make it there, because there's so much here.
Yeah, you could spend 2 hours
Witness.
just on the first, just what I just read.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Mike, in with you. So when they had something, so they set up the hierarchy of judges, correct? And then if they had a problem, they were to go to Moshe. What did Moshe do? He went to Adonai and asked. And so it's kind of that idea of the hierarchy. And then after judges, after Moshe and then the judges, then who was the one that judged? King Solomon.
And that's why I do think it's important to have even congregations, just leaders in a congregation, to prevent, searching out your own way of condemning someone or calling something out for wickedness. You're to bring it to the judges, to the leaders of the church, and it's on them to decide. You're bringing it, so it's no longer on you. They have to live a certain way to be able to cast a stone, rather than if they live unrighteously, how are they then supposed to govern the congregation? Who has it?
So looking at this Torah portion, Shoftim, it opens Shoftim v'Shotrim. Shoftim, those are your judges. Shotrim are your police officers. So whenever you have judges passing laws, or not, judges don't pass laws, but they interpret law and make decisions based off the law. Whenever that happens, even in, let's say, a criminal case, you always need police officers to enforce it. That's what the Shotrim come in. These are like the police officers. So when you have something that is a judge passes a sentence, the sentence carries no weight unless there's any enforcement. If you pass judgment in your own life, like I should be living according to Torah in this way, that decision that you as the judge of your life decided to make, that carries no weight unless you hold yourself accountable to that decision. So that said, the government of Israel is laid out as follows. A community this size, I'd say we have about 200 people, 300 people, 400 people at Sukkot, about 200 men, adult-aged men, is the minimum needed for a village to have 3 judges. Those 3 judges are going to sit in the gate. If there's a close decision, they're going to add 2 more judges. And if it's still close, they're going to add 2 more. So it can be up to 7 judges in the gate. Then the next level up is your tribal government. For your tribal government or a big city, you're going to have 23 judges. And then on the Temple Mount, you had the court of 70. But on the Temple Mount, there was also 2 smaller courts of 23 apiece. Why? Because Jerusalem falls in the middle of the territory boundary of Judah and Benjamin. So on the Temple Mount, both Judah and Benjamin have their tribal judge courts on the Temple Mount, 23 apiece. And then from the judges of the 23 cities and tribes scattered all over Israel, we pull our 70 judges. And these judges are trained in Torah law. They're trained in how to interpret Torah law. They're trained in how to use precedent to interpret Torah law. They're trained astronomers. They're trained doctors. They're trained in agriculture. They're trained in medicine. They're trained in different areas of the trade. Because let's just ignore a rabbinic viewpoint for a minute. Let's just say we are Israel, which we are. Would we not want our lawyers to be interpreting our law if someone has a gift in that? Would we not want someone who has a gift in medicine to be interpreting the parts of Torah pertaining to medicine? Would we not want the shepherd who's trained to be a shepherd be interpreting the parts of Torah pertaining to that? So that's how Israel's government was laid up. And also, these are men who have been studying the Torah in Hebrew since they were 5 years old and have the whole Torah memorized.
Yeah.
So this is the judicial system. This is the system we're following if we're in the land.
Is it 16:20, Donnie, that justice is repeated twice in the Hebrew?
Yes.
So that is, like what you're saying, it's emphasizing that urgency and importance of having that justice judgment in the land. So yeah, that was good. Any other? Okay. Someone want to read from 17:14 through the rest of the chapter?
When you have entered the land Jehovah your God is giving you, have taken possession of it and are living there, you may say, I want to have a king over me like all the other nations around me. In that event, you must appoint a king to the one whom Jehovah your God will choose. He must be one of your kinsmen, this king you appoint over you. You are forbidden to appoint a foreigner over you who is not your kinsman. However, he is not to acquire many horses for himself, or have the people return to Egypt to obtain more horses, inasmuch as Jehovah told you never to go back that way again. Likewise, he is not to acquire many wives for himself, so that his heart will not turn away, and he is not to acquire excessive quantities of silver and gold. When he has come to occupy the throne of his kingdom, he is to write a copy of this Torah for himself in a scroll, from the one the Kohanim, the Leviim, use. It is to remain with him, and he is to read it every day, as long as he lives, so that he will learn to fear Jehovah his God, and keep all the words of this Torah and these laws, and obey them, so that he will not think he is better than his kinsmen, or so that he will not turn aside either to the right or to the left from the mitzvah. In this way he will prolong his own reign and that of his children in Israel.
Yeah, I was reading through it again this morning, and I just thought the restrictions, almost in a way of a king, were interesting. He must be an Israelite, not a foreigner. Must not multiply horses. Must not multiply wives. Must not multiply wealth. And he must write his own Torah and read it daily. And even Solomon failed at that. All the kings failed at this except the king, Yeshua, was the perfect representation of those things I just read through.
I was just adding to you, he broke all three. Solomon broke all three.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It just speaks to us as well as humble, and we're supposed to live in this state of humility. And
It's interesting. I was just last semester in college. I was writing a paper on polygyny in the Bible, and this was obviously one of the most important verses. Deuteronomy, I think it was 17:18, Deuteronomy, right? Can't remember, but Solomon broke all three. I remember learning about that. But the one thing that just kind of left me confused was King David had 15 wives, or concubines and wives, and I understood the weight of, King Solomon had almost nearly 1,000 of mixture between wives and concubines, and obviously there's a huge gap there, but King David, I don't remember reading that he was ever explicitly condemned for having his own multiple wives in any way. So I'm not sure what to do with Deuteronomy 17:18, and but yeah, that's one thing I was always curious about.
mm-hmm. I always thought it was interesting, if you go with King David, he wasn't allowed to build a temple, but that was carried over to Solomon. But Mike?
Yeah, I know that the dilemma there is, why did Yahweh allow men to have more than one wife? Specifically, kings, they did have more restrictions because, like bribery, he told them why not to multiply wives, because they will turn you away. Because it was customary for kings to marry into other nations to gain alliances, and so I'm sure he had wives from a lot of different nations, and they ended up influencing him, obviously. So that was the reason why. But one of the reasons that, and it's of course it's not allowed in our day, and it shouldn't be. But the reason was for procreation. When one of Adam's first commands was to populate the earth, and so that was the reason. And today, people that try to support that it's okay, I would challenge them that it's not for procreation; it's for other reasons. And so that was, I think, the reason it was allowed in the beginning, to populate the earth.
Yeah, the most important part for me for this section was the writing of the Torah, the daily writing of the king, and what that represents is, like Yahweh said, he promised to write it on our hearts. And in Revelation, if we're called to be kings and priests, are we studying the Torah every morning, daily, throughout the day? Because as we see, I think that is the representation of what Yahweh is trying to get across as well now. Donnie? Or who has it? Sorry, Kevin.
I was going to add, with the king, I understood that it was Yahoo knew what they needed, and they needed that king, that ultimate. They needed that king, and so he allowed it to happen. It didn't break Torah, but he allowed it to happen, knowing that he would have to be sending Yeshua to be the ultimate king, and so part of that was a foreshadowing of knowing to come, because Moses even talked about it in this later on, about prophesying that there would be a king who would be. And so it was one of those things where he was allowing it to happen because they know it needed to happen, and through that he brought the ultimate King Yeshua.
Didn't they ask for a king, right?
Yeah.
So was that the original plan?
No, I understood it wasn't the original plan, but he was allowing it, and it didn't like violate Torah, but at the same time, he put stipulations. But he knew him. That's how I heard it was spoken, and knowing that ultimately Yeshua would be the king.
It just points to also, like, the Torah is perfect. Man is not.
Just an interesting analogy about Solomon, real quick. But touching on what you just said, Israel was supposed to ask for a king, but they were not supposed to ask for a king too, which tells us they were supposed to ask for King Messiah.
Yeah.
They were supposed to search for the true king Messiah from the tribe of Judah. So that's just my thought on that. But also, regarding the king writing the Torah, he's actually, it says he's supposed to write a copy of the Torah. So from that, Israel deduced, and then the rabbis deduced that he's actually supposed to write 2 copies of Torah out. He's supposed to write one to be put in the treasury, and he's supposed to write one for himself. Mm-hmm. So imagine if your kings had to write, or your president had to write 2 copies of the Bible, right? And then, furthermore, Solomon, he justified it, and this is why the season is so important, the 6th month that we're in, is because we are learning not to justify sin. Because Solomon, he justified it. He looked at the Torah and he said, okay, wives, gold, and horses, turning the heart away. That's the reason for the command. Solomon's thinking like a lawyer, right? God gives the command, and then he gives a reason for the command. If the reason doesn't exist, says Solomon, then there's no need for the command. For instance, with the wives, they will turn your heart away. Right? The wives, the reason is do not multiply wives because they'll turn your heart away. So if my heart stays true, right, and my heart isn't turned away, is there a need for the commandment? This is what he's thinking. I'm not saying it's right, it's wrong. He was wrong. They did turn his heart away, and this is where him and his wisdom became foolish.
Right.
And then regarding the wives. And the culture, if you look at first century and even ancient culture, there was a balance. There was a power balance that was a lot different. We have to put our minds back into that culture. There's a power balance that was different. So women were not economically able to support themselves. Women were dependent on men for that. And thankfully, we live in a society where there's more balance. But in that society, men kind of took the role of protector. So that's why you saw more polygamy in that case. There was less men, more women. And because of that, I'm not justifying it. It's not ideal. But that's why. And then the limit for kings is 18. That was the limit for wives. Because David had 6, and when he sinned with Bathsheba, God told him, if you had asked, I would have gladly doubled and then added these again. So 6 doubled is 12, and then these added again is 18. So answering those questions.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about Solomon. The point of those restrictions is to not rely on the military, not rely on wealth, and don't allow yourself to be shied away from lust. And he was called to be filled with the most wisdom, and in a sense, he really was foolish. I like that.
Within what you were saying, wasn't God was angry because they asked for a king, because he said it should have been enough that he brought them out of Egypt. It should have been enough that he was the king of them, guiding them through everything. But then he conceded for the king that they were looking for. But is it true that he was angry with that and it should have been enough? Yes?
I don't know if it was anger, but I know that he was definitely upset with them, because that's in 1 Samuel. If you want to read it, it's in 1 Samuel 8, 1 through 8.
Sorry, I just want to add really quick. I've been thinking about and researching Jesus' divinity, in terms of like the Trinity. And yeah, referring to 1 Samuel 8, Donnie said, was it Donnie that said that they were rejecting, that Israel wanted an earthly king, but they didn't want the Messiah. But 1 Samuel 8 shows that they didn't even want God to be their king. And if Jesus is the true king, then that doesn't mean he's just the Messiah. But they also rejected God. and thus they rejected Jesus, or Yeshua, the Messiah, who is God, in the same way they did in 1 Samuel 8. So this is just kind of like another verse that shows me that Yeshua is God.
You're lapsing today, Michael.
I found it interesting as we were reading this earlier. It seems that there's correlations here with Jehovah making provision for a king the same way that he made provision for divorce. He's like, I know you guys better than you know yourselves. I've set out things this perfect way in my Torah, but I know you're going to want something different. So when you want something different than what I've given you, here's how you're supposed to go about it. But the whole purpose of the Torah, especially in Deuteronomy that we've been reading, has been don't do things the way the nations do them. But when you choose to, here's how you do it.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, I think that's why he said when they came into the land, they were supposed to get rid of all the idols, kill everybody, because he knew what they were going to do. And if the world I often think if the world today lived by Torah principles, everybody, agricultural, economical, there'd be no poverty, it would be the perfect living environment.
The one great theme that I see through especially the Old Testament, as well as the New Testament, is the grace of Jehovah. I know as a youngster it was kind of hard to find grace in the Old Testament, but as you really get in and dig, right here are many examples. They did not do things the way God asked, and yet he gave them grace. He allowed them to still come before him and worship, and that's a pattern that runs through the whole scriptures. And I didn't want us to overlook God's grace.
Yeah, great point, because I think, and even in churches today, people think, like you said, when we were younger, it was harder to find mercy and grace in the Old Testament, but people think that's a New Testament theology, when really it's all through the Old Testament. That's a great point.
And then to piggyback off what he had said, this is me interpreting this, but it's almost as if he did concede to it. He was upset with making the decision to king, so he says, okay, fine, you want that? Here's the first one you get Saul. Just sharing.
Yeah, well, Saul was the first king, and he didn't do so well, did he?
He started out good.
Yeah. Yeah, to her point about grace, I was looking for the scripture in the New Testament. It says, where sin did abound, grace did much more. And that all began in the garden.
Right.
And I believe that Yahweh gave Adam and Eve the whole salvation story, when they sinned, on how to get back to the Garden of Eden and how to eventually partake of the tree of life to live forever. So, as we know in Revelation, in the last chapter, it says, blessed are they that keep the commandments of God, that they may have a right to the tree of life. And as we read in here in Deuteronomy and even in Genesis, I think it's 18, where Yahweh said that I know Abraham, that he will teach his children and his children's children. And we know that with Adam and Eve, they had a good father, and they were given good instruction. And so the salvation, and even if you look in the Hebrew, in the first verse in the Bible, in the Hebrew letters, each letter has a meaning, not just the word, each letter. The salvation story is written in the letters of ancient Hebrew, and it's pretty amazing. But yes, grace did begin in the garden.
Okay. Can I get a reader? Let's try to read through the 18, the whole chapter. Can I get a reader for that? Stevie, thank you. Chapter 18.
18. The Kohanim, or Leviim, and indeed the whole tribe of Levi, are not to have a share or an inheritance with Israel. Instead, their support will come from the food offered by fire to Yehovah, and from whatever else becomes his. They will have no inheritance with their brothers, because Yehovah is their inheritance, as he has said to them. The Kohanim will have the right to receive from the people, from those offering a offering, whether ox or sheep, the shoulder, the jowls, and the stomach. You will also give him the first fruits of your grain, new wine, and olive oil, and the first of the fleece of your sheep. For Yehovah, your Elohim, has chosen him from all your tribes to stand and serve in the name of Yehovah, him and his sons forever.
Oh, the whole chapter.
If a Levi from one of your towns anywhere in Israel where he is living comes highly motivated to the place which Yehovah will choose, then he will serve there in the name of Yehovah his Elohim, just like his kinsmen, the Leviim, who stand and serve in the presence of Yehovah. Such a Levi will receive the same share as they do, in addition to what he may receive from selling his inherited ancestral property. When you enter the land Yehovah, your Elohim, is giving you, you are not to learn how to follow the abominable practices of those nations. There must not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter pass through fire, a diviner, a soothsayer, an enchanter, a sorcerer, a spellcaster, the consulter of ghosts or spirits, or a necromancer. For whoever does these things is detestable to Yehovah. And because of these abominations, Yehovah, your Elohim, is driving them out ahead of you. You must be wholehearted with Yehovah, your Elohim. For these nations which you are about to dispossess listen to soothsayers and diviners. But you, Yehovah, your Elohim, does not allow you to do this. Yehovah will raise up for you a prophet like me from among yourselves, from your own kinsmen. You are to pay attention to him. Just as when you were assembled at Horeb and requested Yehovah, your Elohim, don't let me hear the voice of Yehovah, my Elohim, anymore, or let me see this great fire ever again. If I do, I will die. On that occasion, Yehovah said to me, they are right in what they're saying. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their kinsmen. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I order him. Whoever doesn't listen to my words, which he will speak in my name, will have to account for himself to me. But if a prophet presumptuously speaks a word in my name, which I didn't order him to say, or if he speaks in the name of other gods, then that prophet must die. You may be wondering, how are we to know if a word has not been spoken by Yehovah? When a prophet speaks in the name of Yehovah, and the prediction does not come true, that is, the word is not fulfilled, then Jehovah did not speak that word. The prophet who said it spoke presumptuously. You have nothing to fear from him.
Thank you, Stevie. So the prophet, we should all know that that's Yeshua, right? And to me, this is one of the most important pieces of Scripture, really. For me, I've seen a lot of teachers or videos online that if you are listening to some people and they're, you might have some date setters, you might have people that say Yahweh told me this, Yahweh told me that this was going to happen. And if that doesn't happen, it says here, you should definitely be walking away from that congregation or those videos you're watching. And it points back to the Torah, writing down the Torah and studying it daily. That's why it's important to know the times and the seasons and the signs that we're supposed to know about, to know these things, so then you just don't depend on YouTube Joe to go off of his teaching. Any comments there?
If you want an example of that, it's in Jeremiah 28:9 through the end of the chapter. That gives you a biblical example of that.
I'm just now realizing you guys probably already know this, but I think it's cool that Deuteronomy 8:15, to listen to him, is the same words being used in the Transfiguration. When the cloud says, listen to him, to Yeshua.
And in Acts 3:22, it confirms that Yeshua is the prophet that they're talking about here as well. How much time we have? Oh, okay. What? It's 11:50. He gave me the timeout. Okay. You want to keep reading, you said?
I think 19's important because it duplicates some exact same things you just read.
Okay.
Matters like.
All right, I'll read through.
Yeah, I think 19 is really important because it repeats some exact same things we talked about in the previous chapters, specifically matters of controversy.
Do you want to read it?
Sure. And when Yahweh thy God hath cut off the nations whose land Yahweh thy God gives you, and you succeedeth them, and dwellest in their cities and in their houses, you shall separate 3 cities for you in the midst of the land which Yahweh your God gives you to possess, and thou shalt prepare thee a way and divide the coast of the land which Yahweh thy God gives you to inherit into 3 parts, that every slayer may flee thither. And this is the case of the slayer which shall flee thither, that he may live. Whosoever killeth his neighbor ignorantly, whom he hateth not in times past, as when a man goes into the wood with his neighbor to hew wood, and his hand fetcheth a stroke with the axe to cut down a tree, and the head slips from the helve and lighteth upon his neighbor that he die, he shall flee unto one of those cities and live, lest the avenger of the blood pursue the slayer while his heart is hot, and overtake him because the way is long, and slay him, whereas he was not worthy of death, insomuch as he hated him not in times past. Wherefore I command you, saying, Thou shalt separate 3 cities for you, and if Yahweh thy God enlarge your coast as he hath sworn unto your fathers, and give you all the land which is promised to give unto your fathers, if you shall keep all these commandments to do them, which I command you this day, to love Yahweh your God, to walk ever in his ways, then you shall add 3 more cities for you besides these 3, that innocent blood be not shed in the land which Yahweh gives you for an inheritance, and so blood be upon you. But if any man hate his neighbor, and lie in wait for him, and rise up against him, and smite him mortally that he die, and flees into one of these cities, then the elders of the city shall send and fetch him thence, and deliver him into the hand of the avenger of blood, that he may die. Your eye shall not pity him, but you shall put away the guilt of innocent blood from Israel, that it may go well with you. You shall not remove your neighbor's landmark, which they of old time have set in your inheritance, which you shall inherit in the land which Yahweh your God gives you to possess. One witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity or for any sin in any sin that he sins. At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, shall the matter be established. If a false witness rise up against any man to testify against him that which is wrong, then both the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before Yahweh, before the priest and the judges which shall be in those days. And the judges shall make diligent inquisition, and behold, if the witnesses be a false witness and hath testified falsely against his brother, then you shall do unto him as he thought to have done unto his brother. So shalt thou put away evil from among you. And those which remain shall hear and fear, and shall henceforth commit no more such evil among you. Your eye shall not pity, but life shall go for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot.
Yeah, that 19 is good. I mean, obviously, for me, Yeshua is our city of refuge, right? We're to run to him and escape the avenger of blood. And there's very specific ways to do that. I mean,
and how long was the one who fled to that city? How long was he supposed to stay in that city?
was it 7 years? No.
Until the death of the high priest.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And so at the death of the high priest, he was free to go. And so that signifies again, the work of the Messiah. Through the death of our high priest, he has freed us, from the avenger.
Because his refuge is not temporary, it's eternal. So it definitely points to that. And it's the same as if we run to Yeshua daily with our refuge, then at the same time, how are we upholding that standard of justice on how we treat others? And that's just as important as seeking out your own refuge, is treating others with the same respect. I'm getting the time out for the second time. Any last comments? Okay. Thank you, everyone.